You never realize how fragile your peace is until someone decides to weaponize it against you. I had thought my life was already in pieces, divorced, jobless after a factory shutdown, barely holding on to shared custody of my teenage son Caleb. But the day the HOA came for my home, I learned there are levels of ruin I hadn't even imagined. My name is Daniel Hart. If you'd told me 2 years ago that the tiny bungalow my mother left me would become a battleground, I'd have laughed it off. It wasn't much, just a one-story place tucked against the pines near the edge of Birchwood Lake. The siding peeled in places, and the roof leaked when storms rolled in, but it was mine. More than that, it was Caleb's inheritance, a piece of stability in a world that had taken far too much from us already. The neighborhood had its quirks: retirees who trimmed their hedges into perfect squares, weekend fishermen who left beer cans rattling in their boats, families who nodded politely but never invited me to barbecues. It all seemed harmless enough, until I crossed paths with the Birchwood Lakeside HOA. They had a leader, a woman named Claudia Reeves. Sharp suits, colder eyes, and a voice that could slice through steel. She called herself the president, though no one in my street recalled ever voting. Claudia had the kind of confidence you only see in people who've never heard the word no. The first time she showed up at my place, she wasn't alone. She arrived in a white Lexus, flanked by a man with a survey tripod and another carrying a stack of clipboards. Claudia didn't knock. She marched up my steps like she owned them. "Mr. Hart," she said, her tone already carrying the weight of accusation, "your property is in violation of multiple neighborhood codes. We'll need to conduct an emergency inspection." I told her I'd never requested an inspection. Her lips curled like I'd said something amusing. "These things aren't requests. They're requirements." Behind her, the surveyor set up equipment. The clipboard man snapped photos of my peeling paint and sagging gutter. Every click of the camera felt like a bullet through what little pride I had left. I tried to argue, but Claudia's voice cut me off like a blade. "We have records of an unstable individual, jobless, divorced, prone to aggressive outbursts, living in unsafe conditions. Does your son know how dangerous this place really is?" That line hit like a sucker punch. Not just because of Caleb, but because it was calculated. Claudia had dug into my life. She knew about the factory layoff, the custody hearings, even the court-mandated therapy sessions after my divorce. She had weaponized my pain before I could even react. When they finally left, I stood on my porch, shaking with rage I couldn't show. Across the street, curtains twitched. Neighbors I'd shared polite nods with were now peering at me like I was radioactive. By the next morning, flyers had sprouted like weeds on mailboxes. "Community Safety Alert," the heading screamed in official fonts. Beneath it, my name, my address, and photos of me mid-argument, looking unhinged with my hands raised, my face twisted in frustration. "Unstable resident. Documented incidents. Risk to minors." Caleb came home from school crying. "Dad," he said, "kids are saying you're dangerous. They said the HOA wants to take our house. Is it true?" I hugged him, trying to steady my trembling hands. "No one is taking our house, and I would never hurt anyone, ever." But I could see the doubt flicker in his 14-year-old eyes. That doubt broke me more than anything Claudia had done. Over the next week, my world shrank. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. The hardware store clerk, who used to chat about fishing, now muttered one-word answers. Even my mail was left at the curb, like the carrier didn't dare step onto my porch. The isolation pressed in like a coffin. That's when a black sedan pulled into my driveway. For a moment, I thought it was another HOA stunt. But the man who stepped out wasn't one of Claudia's flunkies. He was older, in his 60s, suit pressed sharp, with eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Hart?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "I'm Victor Lane, from the state office. We've had reports of irregular HOA activities in this area. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Relief mixed with suspicion. I invited him in. Victor's questions were precise. Property lines, forged documents, survey discrepancies. When I mentioned the old boundary marker that seemed suspiciously moved closer to my house, he scribbled notes like I was confirming something he already knew. Before leaving, He handed me a card. If things escalate, call me. Document everything. Photos, witnesses, recordings. Don't let them box you in. His eyes locked on mine. Serious. This isn't just about you, Mr. Hart. These people operate like predators. That night, as I stared at his card on my kitchen table, headlights swept across my window. Claudia's Lexus idled at the end of my driveway. When she saw me watching, she traced a finger across her throat and drove off. The next day, a knock rattled my door. It was Miguel Torres, the same surveyor who'd come with Claudia. His shoulders slumped like he carried a weight too heavy for one man. "Daniel," he whispered, "I need to tell you something. She's forcing me to falsify surveys. If I don't, she'll report my immigration paperwork issues and I'll lose my license." I kept copies. He shoved an envelope into my hands. "Use them." Inside were maps, property records, and falsified boundary corrections. Dozens of them. Each showed pieces of neighbors' land transferred to a company I'd never heard of. Evergreen Properties, LLC. Claudia's company. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. Claudia wasn't just after my home. She'd been carving up the whole neighborhood for years, one forged survey at a time. Families losing slivers of backyard, rights to wells, access to gardens, all funneled into her shell company. I knew then I couldn't stay quiet. At the monthly neighborhood cookout, Claudia held court near the buffet tables, talking about community safety initiatives. When I walked in, conversation stuttered. Every eye locked on me, the dangerous pariah. "Claudia," I said loudly, unsealing the envelope of maps. "Care to explain why Evergreen Properties is listed on these falsified surveys?" Gasps rippled as neighbors leaned in. Claudia's smile faltered, then snapped back into place. "That's disinformation, routine corrections, nothing more." But I held up a map for all to see. The Johnsons lost 15 feet of their yard. The Lees pay access fees for water from their own well. This isn't routine. This is theft. Murmurs spread, eyes widening as neighbors compared stories. Claudia's mask cracked. "You're unstable," she snapped, her voice rising. "Everyone knows about your history. No one will believe you." But then Miguel stepped forward. His voice shook, but it carried. "It's true. She made me falsify documents. I have proof." The crowd turned. For the first time, the spell of Claudia's authority wavered. Claudia stormed off, muttering into her phone. That night, she went live on the community's social media page, declaring herself the emergency HOA chairwoman with full authority to protect neighborhood safety. She held up forged deeds on camera, boasting about Evergreen's development rights. She was too arrogant to realize she was confessing to fraud in front of hundreds of witnesses. By the next morning, the video had spread beyond our neighborhood. Screenshots, shares, comments tearing apart her lies. Claudia had effectively signed her own warrant. Victor returned 2 days later. This time with a badge. "Daniel," he said, "I'm not just from the state office. I'm the state attorney general." He laid out a folder thick with evidence, bank transfers to Evergreen, recorded conversations, even surveillance of Claudia, coaching others on how to intimidate residents. "Your case unlocked a statewide investigation. She's stolen from at least 15 families across 3 counties. I barely had time to process before Claudia herself walked straight into the trap. She showed up at my house with a process server and a leather briefcase. Convinced she was about to seize my home. She spotted Victor sitting at my table and mistook him for an ally. "Perfect," she said, smiling wide. "A state representative. You can witness this transfer." She laid out her forged papers like a queen playing her final card. Victor rose slowly, badge glinting in the light. "Claudia Reeves, I'm the Attorney General of this state. You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and property theft." The color drained from her face. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Claudia lunged, clawing at the documents, screaming about 20 years of planning. I grabbed her wrists. Victor snapped handcuffs over them with calm precision. Neighbors gathered outside as police cars rolled up. Claudia shrieked about backup plans and appeals as she was shoved into the back seat. The illusion of power that had terrorized us all was gone. In the weeks that followed, Evergreen Properties was dissolved, assets liquidated to compensate victims. Boundaries were restored, gardens replanted, wells returned. Miguel, once terrified, became the county's trusted surveyor, a whistleblower turned advocate. Neighbors who had avoided me for months showed up at my porch with casseroles and apologies. Most important, the court restored my custody rights. When Caleb handed me a drawing of us fishing by the lake with the words, "My dad," scrawled across the top, I knew the fight had been worth every bruise. But peace never lasts forever. One evening, months after Claudia's sentencing, my phone rang with a blocked number. A distorted voice hissed, "You destroyed my sister's life. We don't forget." I froze, staring at the water outside. Across the lake, a figure stood watching through binoculars, too still to be casual, too familiar to be innocent. I told Caleb it was nothing, just a prank call. But inside, I knew. Winning one battle doesn't end the war. Sometimes justice is only the start of another fight. And I would be ready.